Imagine waking up one morning and finding yourself buried under 80,000 pages of accusations and documents. Every word, every page, filled with weight and suspicion, waiting to crush your reputation. That is the storm Blake Lively is standing in right now. She did not choose this battle, yet it has come crashing down on her like a tidal wave. The name Blake Lively, once connected with elegance, talent, and admiration, is now tied to a controversy that has left Hollywood buzzing and the internet on fire. This is not just about legal papers or celebrity drama. This is about trust, betrayal, and the fear of having your entire world rewritten by someone else's hand. For Blake, it is more than a headline. It is a fight to protect her voice, her image, and her dignity. And standing opposite her is Justin Baldoni, the man whose move to release more than 80,000 pages of documents has turned a private conflict into a public war. As fans watch in shock and as social media explodes with endless debate, one thing becomes clear. This story is not just about two famous names. It is a mirror of how fragile reputation can be, and how quickly trust can unravel when the weight of secrets becomes too heavy. The story begins with a number that feels impossible to understand: 80,000. That is how many pages of documents Justin Baldoni brought forward in this scandal. For most people, a single page of accusation would be enough to shake their confidence. But for Blake Lively, the situation came in the form of a mountain of paper, a flood so overwhelming that even the strongest person would struggle to stand tall against it. When news first broke that Baldoni had released the documents, the reaction was instant and fierce. Headlines appeared within minutes. Words like explosive, shocking, and destructive filled the feeds of major outlets. Fans rushed online to share their disbelief. Some people defended Baldoni, saying that such a release must have been necessary. Others stood firmly with Blake, believing that no one deserves to have their life dragged out in such a heavy and humiliating way. Hollywood thrives on drama, yet even in a world where scandals arrive almost daily, the size of this document dump made it stand apart. Imagine the sheer scale of it. 80,000 pages is not a leak. It is not a rumor. It is a tidal wave of information designed to overwhelm. The number alone became a headline. The shock was not only about what might be written in the pages, but about how anyone could gather so much material and why it all had to be unleashed at once. For Blake, the timing could not have been worse. Her career has been steady, her public image has been strong, and her fans have remained loyal. But in a single moment, the stability she had worked so hard to build was placed on a fault line. The press was not asking whether she would respond. They were asking how soon she would break. The focus was no longer on her work as an actress or her life as a mother and partner. It was on the wake of documents stacked against her name. As journalists dug deeper, more questions began to surface. What secrets could be hidden in these pages? Why were they collected in the first place? And perhaps most importantly, what did Justin Baldoni gain by making them public? The release was not simply about sharing information. It was a strategic move, one that turned private tension into public spectacle. And in Hollywood, where perception is power, perception can make or break even the strongest careers. For fans of Blake Lively, the moment felt personal. She has long been admired for her poise, her kindness, and her steady balance of stardom and normal life. Seeing her caught in a battle of this size felt like a betrayal to the image many had trusted. For critics, however, the document dump became a symbol of the hidden sides of celebrity life, a reminder that behind the red carpets and smiles, there are shadows waiting to surface. The scandal of the documents is not just about what they contain. It is about the way they were used. The act of unleashing 80,000 pages in itself told a story of confrontation, of power, and of control. And at the center of that storm stood Blake Lively, staring at a mountain that was never meant to be climbed. To understand why this scandal has shaken the internet so deeply, we must first understand who Blake Lively is. She is not just another Hollywood star. She represents a rare blend of talent, grace, and relatability that has allowed her to remain one of the most admired figures in entertainment. Blake was introduced to the world at a young age. Born into a family connected with the film industry, she seemed destined to step into the spotlight. But what made her rise stand out was not only her background, it was the way she carried herself with charm and natural warmth. When she first appeared on screen, audiences felt an immediate connection. Her breakout role on the beloved series Gossip Girl cemented her as a cultural icon. For an entire generation, Blake was more than an actress. She was the face of style, elegance, and youthful ambition. Her career then moved beyond television. She became a force in Hollywood films, taking on roles that showcased her versatility. She showed depth, she showed strength, and audiences grew with her. She was not a passing trend. She was a figure who commanded long-term respect. Yet, Blake's story is not only about her acting. It is also about the way she has lived her life outside the screen. In a culture where many celebrities stumble under the weight of fame, Blake has managed to build a stable family life. Her marriage to Ryan Reynolds became one of Hollywood's most celebrated partnerships. Fans admired the way she balanced family with career. She seemed to have achieved what so many in the industry could not, a life that felt grounded. That image became her armor. Blake Lively was not known for scandal or chaos. She was known for her poise. She rarely engaged in feuds. She rarely gave in to public drama. This is why the current scandal feels so different. For someone whose career was built on trust, charm, and stability, being tied to 80,000 pages of documents feels like a blow not just to her image, but to the narrative fans have held close for more than a decade. In Hollywood, image is everything. For some stars, controversy becomes part of their brand. But for Blake, her brand was built on dignity and balance. That is what made her beloved. That is what made her admired. And that is what is now at stake. The scandal is not only about what is written in those pages, it is about the way those pages could do to undo the trust she has spent years building. Her fans see her more than an actress. They see her as a role model, as someone who has managed to rise above the chaos.
Recognition and a strong fan following. But Baldoni was never content with being only an actor. He wanted to create. He wanted to direct. He wanted to build stories that carried impact. This ambition led him to move behind the camera, where he began shaping films that aimed to inspire and connect with audiences on a deeper level. His reputation became tied to projects that carried emotional weight. He directed films like 5 Feet Apart and Clouds, both of which centered around themes of love, resilience, and the fragility of life. His work was celebrated for its sensitivity, and his interviews often highlighted his desire to push Hollywood toward more meaningful storytelling. In many ways, Baldoni built his career not only on entertainment, but on the promise of heart. But Hollywood is not just about art. It is also about perception. And while Justin's image has been crafted as thoughtful and authentic, this scandal has now tied his name to an entirely different narrative. Instead of being discussed as the director with the mission to inspire, he is being discussed as the man behind 80,000 pages of documents released in a way that feels overwhelming and strategic. For supporters of Baldoni, this move may appear as an act of transparency, a decision to put all the cards on the table. For critics, however, it feels like an act of aggression, a way to weaponize information and overwhelm his opponent. The duality of perception is powerful, and it is shaping the way the internet reacts. Justin Baldoni's role in this scandal matters because of what he represents. He has positioned himself as a public figure who values empathy, honesty, and healing. But the release of the documents challenges that image. If his goal was truth, why release them in such a crushing volume? If his goal was fairness, why present information in a way that feels impossible to digest? These questions now hang over him as heavily as the documents themselves. And so we find ourselves at a crossroads. Two public figures, each with reputations carefully built over years, now locked in a struggle that feels larger than both of them. For Blake Lively, this is a fight to defend the dignity she has always represented. For Justin Baldoni, this is a fight to justify an act that may be seen as either courageous or destructive, depending on who is asked. The clash between these two stars is not simply about the documents. It is about identity, image, and the stories we tell about ourselves. It is about the way two public figures who once stood for stability and sincerity are now seen as players in one of the most dramatic Hollywood showdowns in recent memory. When the news of the document dump hit the press, Hollywood reacted the way it always does, with a mixture of shock, speculation, and strategy. No one in the industry could ignore a scandal of the size. 80,000 pages of documents linked to two household names was a story too big to stay quiet. The phones of journalists rang all night. Agents whispered to clients. Publicists worked overtime to prepare responses. The machine of Hollywood went into motion. The first wave of headlines was explosive. Major outlets rushed to cover the story. Some focused on the sheer number of pages, calling it one of the most overwhelming information dumps in celebrity history. Others centered on the personal angle, highlighting Blake Lively's position as one of the most admired actresses of her generation. Still others turned their attention to Justin Baldoni, framing him as the man who had chosen to reveal the documents in such a dramatic fashion. The coverage was everywhere and it was relentless. Inside Hollywood, the reactions were more complicated. Stars live in a world where image is everything and scandal is never far away. Many could not help but see this as a warning. If Blake Lively could be pulled into a storm of this size, then no one was untouchable. Conversations behind closed doors focused less on the details of the case and more on what this kind of release could mean for others. If one celebrity could face 80,000 pages, what might happen if such a move became a new weapon in Hollywood disputes? For insiders close to Blake, the mood was tense. Friends described her as strong but shaken. Supporters emphasized that she had always been a professional, that she had never been one to chase drama, and that she deserved better than to be caught in a storm designed to overwhelm. For those close to Baldoni, the tone was defensive. They described him as someone committed to honesty and transparency. They claimed that the release was necessary, that it was not about attack, but about truth. The entertainment industry thrives on narratives, and this story became one of the most gripping of the year. Talk shows picked it up. Gossip columns dissected every angle. Podcasts devoted entire episodes to debating whether Blake or Baldoni held the moral high ground. Even those who normally ignored celebrity news found themselves drawn in because the scale of the scandal was unlike anything they had seen before. The fallout also extended into business. Hollywood is not only about art. it is also about deals, contracts, and image. A star tied to scandal can lose opportunities overnight, and both Blake and Baldoni found themselves under intense scrutiny. Studios watched carefully to see how audiences reacted. Agents hesitated before attaching their names to either. The scandal was not just personal, it was professional. Careers that had taken years to build were suddenly under review because of a single document dump. And yet the most powerful reaction was not from the studios or the press. It was from the fans. Hollywood lives and dies on public perception, and in this case, the public was divided. The industry quickly realized that this was not a scandal that would fade quietly. This was a story that had become a cultural moment, a test of loyalty for fans, and a test of resilience for two stars whose images had been built on trust and admiration. In the halls of Hollywood, people